Howdy, folks. Welcome back to X Labs. I am your host, Dr. Erika Miley, clinical sexologist, and I am excited. I don't know that that's the word. Humbled to bring you somebody I actually have interacted with in a network we're actually going to talk about here in a little bit. And I'm just so ecstatic to bring you Dr. Julie Bindeman, who is a psychologist who has a ton of experience in reproductive justice and supporting those who, all of us in the world who so desperately need access to healthcare. We're just going to call it healthcare.
100%.
So we're talking about abortion today, people. So if this is a tough topic for you, please feel free to skip it. If you need to skip on, just see us next time. No harm, no foul. If you need to take breaks, because this is going to be a lot, but you're going to get a lot of value out of what we're talking about today. So, Dr. Julie, please give us this landscape, even though there's some of us who are going to be listening are part of supporting a lot of clients and patients through abortion access. But we're going to be talking to people who really probably have no idea what this landscape now looks like. And you've been doing this for a long time. Can you help us understand abortion access now, especially since the fall of Roe?
Absolutely. So first, let me just contextualize myself. My name is Dr. Julie Bindeman. I am a reproductive psychologist, and I practice outside of the Washington, D.C. area. I'm part of SIPAC, which means I'm able to practice telehealth in 44 states. Yay.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
The therapists, the mental health counselors, we're getting our crap together. We got the counseling compact coming, but psychologists have had it. Y'all been doing it for a while, which we appreciate. You paved the way for us.
It is one of the few things that we have done well. Screwed up in a lot, but live and learn. I am someone who gets really excited to talk about abortion, which sounds really strange. I'm even excited to talk about it these days when things are really difficult.
Yeah.
But I think it's something really important to talk about. So before I sort of situate us in abortion, I want to situate us in our values, because I think that's really important. I think oftentimes we don't necessarily reflect on our values. Values are not right or wrong. They're just how we feel about a thing in this moment.
Yes.
So I'm going to read a statement. Your choices are strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree.
All right, y'all. I'm gonna be answering as we go, but this is for me.
Okay.
So do you in your own head, y'all.
100%.
Listening.
Yeah, and come into this with some curiosity. All right, we'll begin. Safe abortion options should be available to anyone who wants them.
Strongly agree. Oh yeah, that's right. That's an answer.
Yeah.
Strongly agree.
People who have an abortion are ending a life.
Strongly disagree.
A woman should be able to have an abortion even if her spouse or partner wants her to continue her pregnancy.
Correct. Strongly agree.
Liberal abortion laws lead to more irresponsible sexual behavior.
Strongly disagree.
Minors should be required to get their parents' consent to have an abortion.
Strongly disagree.
Clinicians who specialize in obstetrics and gynecology have a responsibility to perform abortions.
Strongly agree.
Women and girls should be able to access abortion pills over the counter without a prescription.
Strongly agree.
Someone who is pregnant and HIV positive should be counseled to end their pregnancy even if the pregnancy is wanted.
Strongly disagree.
Most people, especially young people, do not seriously consider the consequences of an abortion.
Strongly disagree.
Abortion should continue to be available at or after 13 weeks of pregnancy, meaning the second trimester.
You said it should be available? Strongly agree.
People who have abortions at or after 13 weeks are indecisive.
Strongly disagree.
People who have more than one abortion should be encouraged to undergo sterilization.
Strongly disagree.
Safe abortion options should be available to every person who needs one, regardless of their reason or circumstances.
Strongly agree.
To the audience,
Exactly.
what came
Mm.
up that I didn't expect? Were there situations here that perhaps you hadn't considered before? So, just to take a moment with this, and again, no right, no wrong answers.
I think your guidance to pause and let yourself sit with it is really an important one, because I can honestly say that until I had an abortion myself, those answers would have been different.
Sure.
And until I started to really understand what research is showing us, did I understand that those answers would have been different. So I say that because I think what you said is that there is no right or wrong answers to these questions, and that the things of your life will absolutely shift and change those answers.
Yeah, absolutely. In both directions, in either direction. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. So, initially, the question was, okay, let's situate us in sort of what is the history of abortion. Abortion's been around for a long, long, long while. It can be traced back, in fact, to ancient civilizations, which is kind of cool.
Uh-huh.
Mostly, abortion has been handled by women for women, as most birthing experiences have been handled by women for women. It is interesting to look at what is happening internationally around
Mm,
abortion. So, if we think about countries like Mexico and Ireland, both known to be very Catholic countries,
mm,
and in the relative recent past, both of them have been countries that have gone from being abortion is banned to
uh-huh.
abortion can be legal. We might regulate what those circumstances could look like.
Uh,
Let's compare and contrast that to the United States.
uh-huh.
And again, just to situate us, when the colonizers first came over, they had to live off what was there. They had to
Uh-huh.
learn about some new things that they might not have done in their home country. Medicine wasn't really a field. Like, this was a point in time where, like, antiseptic wasn't a thing, hand
Yeah,
washing wasn't a thing. So, outcomes were not great because you factor in all sorts of preventable disease that the professionals bringing into it, or the nurses, or anyone who's assisting.
absolutely.
So in the and in terms of abortion, it would be handled by midwives. And it
Mm,
was just a thing. It started to be kind of where the line was quickening. So that's a term that the colonists used to talk about, and I think it was more of their time, to talk about when a person started to feel movement, and sort of a little more
mm.
consistent movement. So as long as you didn't report quickening, you were able to have an abortion.
You are reminding me of the historical fiction books I have read, and the language around the quickening, and I'm just like recalling all of these different books, and I'm like, oh yes, yes, they talk about it in lieu, like they're trying to describe this point when someone might know, okay, there I'm with child, as they
Yes,
would have said.
exactly. Right. And so as physicians were seeing, like, there were people just selling remedies, and they were like traveling, kind of the snake oil people were
Mm-hmm.
traveling around. And so physicians, and they were noticing midwives were providing a lot of care. And there was a group of physicians that decided, wait a second, they're on our turf now. Like, they're trying to take over what is ours. They should not be able to do these things. This should
Mm-hmm.
only occur from a licensed professional physician.
Mm-hmm.
just a reminder, at that time, they were all men. So
Yes.
kind of funny thing that maybe people who are seeking out abortion care might have preferred midwives because
Mhm.
typically, and it's very gendered, but midwives tended to be women,
We were
particularly
still
women.
in wandering womb territory.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Hysteria, wandering womb, all the fun stuff.
Mhm.
Thank you, Freud. So coming from there, that was fine. That's kind of what it was for a while. Connecticut was the first state to actually codify an abortion ban, which
Interesting.
is really interesting. It might not be what we thought about it before. And then more and more states joined them because there's now regulation around
Mhm.
abortion versus quickening, which is,
Mm.
a little ambiguous.
Yes.
So we moved to that, to physicians, particularly obstetricians, really moving to shape what it is that their area of specialty focus on, what is considered to be their scope of practice.
Mhm.
And they were really trying to push others out. And
Mhm.
so they became very regulated and they became very specific in terms of how abortion care is provided, who can provide it, what that looks like. And states kind of followed suit with that, which
Uh-huh.
is why today it's such a big deal if a state can pass a law that says non medical trained professionals are able to provide abortion care. Like that's
Mm.
huge because that
Yes.
also opens access.
Mhm.
Um, so moving up, states kind of went back and forth with whatever made sense for them. Some had some really strict abortion laws on the book that's kind of stayed on the books. They just didn't enforce them.
Mm.
We're seeing a lot of those zombie laws coming back now.
Yes.
And it was something where in the late 60s, there was a movement about, oh, we need a national kind of message for this. And what
Mhm.
always became difficult is courts are not notoriously quick.
Mm.
And so the only person who could come in and have file suit against a state would be someone who is currently pregnant. But as we all know, pregnancy is a finite event.
Yes.
It has a start, it has a stop.
And it is a very, very specific amount of time. When you are a pregnant person,
It feels
it
forever.
feels like, yeah,
Yeah.
an eternity.
Yes.
Huh. But in reality, 40 weeks,
Yeah,
maybe.
give or take. Yeah. So one of the legal challenges was that lawyers were having was, okay, we want to file suit, but the courts keep telling us that, the people we are choosing don't have what's called standing, which means they don't really have an issue because it's not impacting them now.
Mm.
Well, that's hard because, again, pregnancy is finite. So it wasn't until the 70s where there was this young lawyer and she found a plaintiff. And this
Mm.
was someone who had wanted an abortion for all of her pregnancies and was forced to carry to term and ended up relinquishing each of her children to
Mm.
adoption. What's really interesting is that generationally, this was the story of her family.
Mm.
So if anyone is interested, highly recommend the book A Family Roe, The American Story. It is fabulous. And it really goes into all of this and really talking about Jane Roe and who she was and how her name is actually Norma and how she kind of flip-flopped in terms of her points of view. Just really, really, really interesting.
The book will be in the show notes, folks, just so that you can go find it again if you forget by the end of the episode.
No problem. And finally, they were able to find someone who could have standing. They created a different legal argument for it. So Roe versus Wade. Wade was the Attorney General of the state of Texas at the time, and Jane Roe was the pseudonym given to Norma.
Mhm.
This case went on for a while. It kept on getting appealed, and finally it found its way to the Supreme Court, who granted it cert, which is pretty cool too, because they are now stepping in dangerous water.
Yes.
And this was an interesting case to argue because so many of the theories of the case, particularly in terms of its constitutionality, were these kind of newer ideas. They weren't so specified in the Constitution, but they were more like, okay, but we have this thing that is specified. And if we just kind of make a natural assumption or go that logical path, then this should be true too. So 1973, Supreme Court decided that Roe versus Wade would be federal law, meaning that everyone had the right to obtain an abortion. They put what they called viability. And what's super interesting about this is that's not a medical term. Sorry, I'm so geeking out on this.
You do not need to apologize. And I think it's important for our audience to hear, because there are so many people out here that are probably listening that don't know this history, that don't know that viability isn't a medical term that's defined. So I do think that this is all very important information.
Yeah. So viability is not a medical term. Doctors have kind of adopted it, which is really interesting, but is not part of medical nomenclature. It was a term and a concept decided upon by one of the Supreme Court justices' clerks. So I find that it's so funny.
So it's not even a Supreme Court justice who, one,
Right.
doesn't likely have medical background, one, but two, it is a clerk to a Supreme Court justice.
Who's like 20 something years old. So
My goodness.
super interesting there.
That's wild.
But what the court comes down in a majority decision, because that's how all the decisions need to be, is that they granted the right of an abortion. From 1973 on, we now had specific states fighting against this, trying to narrow and narrow and narrow. And that actually was a plan that was right around the time of Roe, that evangelicals were like, okay, we got to stop this. We don't believe in it. And that is how they came to the attention of Ronald Reagan, how he started to put this and frame it as a political issue. It's a wedge issue, certainly still is.
Yes.
And little by little, they were successful in efforts to chip away at access in certain states. It meant that other states had to do more robust kinds of things in order to protect abortion care in their state. So that's kind of where we are. And then we got to 2022, and in June, many of us cried. Although those of us that were crying, many of us were not surprised either.
Exactly.
So we knew this was coming. That doesn't make it easier, but we knew this was coming.
Yeah.
So that's sort of situating us. We have these countries that are becoming less restrictive around abortion care that historically have been super restrictive. And now we have the United States, who have been really non-restrictive about abortion care. And now it's kind of the luck of your zip code in terms of is there restriction or not.
Yes. This is where it comes to you clearly walked us through time, and you brought us straight up to the point where it is so important for therapists and other healthcare providers to understand all of this background information, but also you don't know exactly what is happening in your specific zip code, likely, until someone who comes to you looking for care brings up the topic of abortion or reproductive rights, and then you have to deal with this. So I would love to hear from you for what are you seeing as some of the most important, they're all important, but what are some of the largest emotional and psychological impacts you're seeing in patients due to the restricted or inaccessible abortion care?
I think it really depends, unfortunately, in terms of where you live. And I'm just putting a reference for you in the chat that you can share out in the show notes, which is an interactive guide by each state. And you can click
Beautiful.
on the state and you can see what the restrictions are not. The map is colored to show red is the most restrictive and dark blue is the least restrictive. gives you kind of that as an overview. And then you can click state by state. And this map has continued to change.
Let's see here. All right, we've got a link. I'm just showing it here quickly,
Okay.
but I will make sure it's in the show notes. And I think if we had like 5 hours, I'd pull it up and we'd start looking at these state by state just so that people could get a sense of it. So I'm going to encourage you to go check out this link that's in the show notes so that you can, and I will be putting together a guide for everybody after our episode so that you can find this information easily. So again, like you don't know until you have to then go looking for this information.
So if you're someone who either is part of something like SIPAC, I know the Social Work Compact is about to come out. I know Counselors is making its way, or some people are just licensed in multiple states. And
Yes.
so if any of these are your circumstances, it is imperative when you're working with someone around any kind of reproductive health issue to know the laws of the state, because
Uh-huh.
that helps you discern what is it I can offer versus what is it that I can't.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can make a decision of, I feel pretty comfortable where I am. I'm going to just offer what I offer. I'm not going to differentiate between states. And I know that that might put me at some risk.
Yeah. It allows having this information will allow people, all of the clinicians out there, to determine what kind of risk they are willing to take on themselves, which will be different. You and I would likely be different than someone else, depending on where they live. Or it might even include like I don't mind sharing. I let my Florida license lapse because of some of the risks, because I do help with reproductive care, but I also help with gender affirming care. And there are states that are actually weaponizing duty to warn to try to get control of clinicians and what information they share.
And I can see that happening with abortion. I think there's in a Venn diagram of those that are anti-trans and those that are anti-abortion, there's a whole lot of dual coverage. So there's
Yes,
not a whole lot of outside that's separate. There tends to be a whole lot of overlap. So
absolutely.
in fact, a lot of the anti-trans movement is using the anti-abortion movement's tactics. So we're chipping
Yeah.
away, we're chipping away.
They're sharing notes with one another. So, when you're seeing people come to you, what are some of their I imagine you're just seeing a variety of people and some of their primary concerns.
Yeah. So again, state specific. So the
Mhm.
people I see tend to live in Maryland, Virginia, and the District of Columbia. We have some of us more than others, but we have pretty open kinds of laws that make us more states that tend to be less restricted.
Mhm.
Um, Virginia's kind of at the bottom with a 20-week ban, but still for the South, that's the best you're going to get. So kind of sad to know that. So more my clients, like after Dobbs came down, my clients were really actually worried about their embryos. Is it safe for me to keep my embryos here in Virginia? And so I would say at this time, yes. It's
Yeah.
a good thing to talk to your REI about, but at this time, yes. Or
Yeah.
people are like, Can I get an abortion in Virginia?" Yes, you are able
Mhm.
to get an abortion. And this is something that becomes super tricky. So if you're in a state that is going back and forth in terms of the legality of abortion, where the legislature makes one decision and then it gets brought to the courts who are like, "You can't do that," particularly if there was a referendum.
Mhm.
Um, it's sort of going back and forth. And so it depends upon where are you in time, which law is being enforced. These change because Missouri passed a referendum. That is what the people wanted. And
Mhm.
last week, the legislature said, F you.
So what was the referendum Missouri was going for?
So the referendum that passed a couple years ago was to say that abortion can be legal.
Mm.
I don't know if they did a certain point, but basically the idea of Missouri was trying to get rid of abortion. And this was, no, this is healthcare. This is important. We need to have the option.
And so the legislature is trying to reject essentially what the people want in that state.
Oh, no, they overturned the will of the people.
Yes.
Yeah. Because they're cool like that.
I told y'all at the top of this episode, like, we're going to be doing a lot of sighing. We're going to be doing a lot of, dear.
Lots of sarcasm from me.
Yes, like this is where we are right now in 2025. That in when Roe was overturned and turning it back to the states has created a very difficult landscape for people who need access and the people who are doing the care, regardless of where you are in that care spectrum.
Yeah. So, like, I think about Ohio, where Ohio had banned abortion, and then there was a referendum passed. And so they reverted back to their 20-week as the stopping point. But when it was banned and the referendum, like, people didn't know, can I seek out an abortion here? Do I have to go somewhere else? So that tends to be a lot of the questions I'm asked is like, okay, here's where I'm located. Able to get an abortion? And so, like, being really and it sucks to have to be really up to date about what the different laws are, what the different court injunctions might be, but all of this is really important
Yeah.
so that
And
we can.
fluid. It sounds like
Yes.
incredibly fluid.
Yes. And something that's super interesting too is there are people in a lot of states that, okay, the state has a ban, but it doesn't mean that they can't access medication that's coming in from somewhere else. So the mail is not being checked yet.
Uh,
Um, you know, that's something that wouldn't surprise me.
I was going to say, Dr. Julie just said yet, y'all. Just remember
Yet.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Yet.
Yeah.
So I want, in your reproductive mental health work, how are these systematic changes showing up across identities, particularly for BIPOC folks, disabled folks, queer folks, trans patients?
Yeah. So, first of all, I think a lot of people make the assumption that only women can obtain abortion care. But there's been some really great research about trans men who obtain abortion care. And what does that mean? And what does that look like? And the assumptions of if I'm on testosterone, I don't need to have to worry about birth control because I'm on testosterone. It unfortunately doesn't necessarily work that way. So, really important that if you work with trans men to just make sure that, hey, they're thinking about something that can also prevent pregnancy. And if they're not with the same partner, STIs as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, just in terms of protection.
Yeah, absolutely.
All the minoritized people who have already been so hurt because of the chipping away, the trap laws, all of the chipping away that has been done to abortion care, depending on their zip code, they're not getting more help. In fact, they're finding their options fewer and fewer. And another thing that's super fun is now the federal government has decided that it's okay to federally fund fake clinics. Yeah,
Can you
fun.
talk a little bit about what these fake clinics are for our folks? Because there's many people who don't know what these are.
Yeah. So one of the things anti-choice people have done is they've started to put up clinics near actual abortion clinics, like maybe even next door. And they have
Uh-huh.
really generic names like, the Women's Center or
The
something that is
pregnancy choice.
right. Something that is so, so, so generic.
Uh-huh.
It's like entrapment instead, where if you step through those doors, you're not going to hear about, like, even if you walk there and you're like, hey, I'm here for my 9 o'clock appointment. They're like, oh, you've come to the right place. You might not know it's not your abortion clinic for a little bit. And it's always interesting. They have an ultrasound machine that first of all, not operated by actual licensed techs, but whatever. Or medical professionals that are in there, but cool, whatever. Nor is the counseling given by someone who is trained to give counseling. So super duper fun, but people will go in there and they will be duped and they will basically be held. And these are the places that promises them we will help resource you so you can have the baby, and they'll show you pictures of a pregnancy at 6 months and claim that that is 7 weeks, and it is not. They look very different. They've
Mm-hmm.
scaled it down, which is the only thing they've done. But otherwise, it's like, that is not what a 7-week ultrasound looks like. So they use scare tactics. They use the promise of assistance and help. Oh, we'll get you diapers. We'll get you like everything you might need. And they're great until the baby's born. and then
Mhm.
see all that help they were supposed to do? Nope. But they got their goal that you didn't have the abortion that you were seeking out. There are women who've gotten, like, have really felt like they were being kidnapped in a way because it's like they would not let them out. And finally, after hours, they're like, "You cannot keep me here. I do not wish to be here." Yeah, there's been some really interesting exposés by people coming in pretending to be pregnant, like to the extent where they get urine from a friend who is pregnant, and
Mhm.
so they can just swap it out so they come up with a positive pregnancy test.
Huh.
And
So
they're
that they
even being told, what the age is of their baby. It's like, "I'm not even pregnant, so lies."
you're like, "And you can't tell that from peeing on a stick," but okay.
No, no, do ultrasounds, and they would be like, "Look at your baby."
Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. Oh, y'all, the sighing continues. Knowing what these fake abortion clinics or choice clinics or whatever they call themselves or shade themselves under to try to keep people from accessing the healthcare they desperately need. Uh, what do you think providers in particular who are not necessarily reproductive mental health specialists or even specialists out in other disciplines, what do they need to know when supporting a client or a patient facing an unplanned pregnancy in 2025?
So I think you first need to know what your biases might be, because the
Yes.
language we choose can betray what our biases are, even if we sit there and go, "You know what? This is what my opinion is, but I promise I am non-judgmental." Okay. Are you calling the pregnancy a fetus? Are you calling it a baby? Both of those have loading to it. So
Uh-huh.
people who tend to be pro-choice will call it more of a fetus, which
Mhm.
may or may not be the correct medical terminology depending upon gestational age.
Mhm.
Whereas, again, doesn't matter gestational age, those that are anti-choice will firmly call it a baby. This is
Mhm.
your baby, and they do what they can to humanize it. That
Mhm.
is also what mental health professionals do. And you're catching me at a great time because I was just writing a chapter about all of this and just read some research about, like, oh, the wording we use is super important because otherwise it does betray our bias.
So language first is what language and what is your bias going to shift your language to be to a patient or a client. So
Yeah.
that's number 1.
Yeah.
What else do they need to know?
I think it's okay if this has to be referred out
Mm,
because, hey, this is not what you know, you don't feel competent in it, it's not part of your scope, and you don't know that you can be objective because you have strong feelings one way or the other.
yes.
So,
And beautiful.
knowing that. Yeah.
Beautiful. No, letting you understanding your own values and your own biases and maybe making the decision to refer out regardless of which direction that might be.
I think one of the things that's really difficult is mental health professionals are expected to determine their own scope of practice. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we are.
So it's interesting in terms of what people decide provides them with enough competency to practice in certain areas. So, like, I
Uh-huh.
think about someone who gets divorced and all of a sudden they are now, helping people through divorce. And it's like, but have you dealt with your own stuff yet?
Right.
The same thing with reproductive care, particularly
Mhm.
abortions. The same too is what has your reproductive story looked like? So,
Uh-huh.
were you denied an abortion? Did you have a friend who had an abortion? Did you have a friend who carried to term?
Mhm.
A sibling who might have, a relative who might have. So, like, what is your kind of known history? What has been your
Uh-huh.
experience, your knowledge, your sort of more firsthand kind of knowledge, the anecdotes that you've heard?
Yes.
And I think it's a really interesting thing that we try to tell ourselves where it's like, well, I don't know anyone who's had an abortion. I promise you you're wrong because
Absolutely.
1 in 3 cisgender women have had an abortion. Pretty astounding.
I had to personally have an abortion. And during that period of time, it was a pregnancy that I wanted and planned for with my partner. But during that time period, there was no way. I had to really look at, I was actually in the very beginning of my graduate school training to be a therapist. And
Oh,
so I had to be really upfront with my professors about what I was dealing with, even though I didn't really want to be upfront with them about what I was dealing with, and let them know, like, hey, if this comes into my internship, I can't be the one, not right now. Now, I am been licensed for 10 years. It is a very, very different story, and I've had very different training. But that young therapist did not have the capacity. And I felt very lucky that I had professors and supervisors around me that could support me and make sure that I could protect the people I was serving at that point from that place where I would have done harm. There's no doubt in my mind.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I've had the same experience twice consecutively,
Mm,
which was super fun,
mm,
where I was pregnant with a wanted pregnancy. And each time we learned that the baby had the same kind of brain defect that
mhm.
would make life moving forward difficult, if not impossible.
Yeah, absolutely.
We made that decision twice. So we're
Yeah.
consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're consistent, but it's also like you don't when you're a clinician and you're serving others and you don't have a sense of the harm you could potentially do either direction, because I knew at that point there was no way I could be biased. And even now, like in my private life, it is very I generally tell people you are not going to get a nuanced conversation from me about being able to access something that is desperately needed, because there's no way, like, for me, it was I was pregnant with conjoined twins,
Oh,
and there was no way they could have survived. And on top of that, if I had continued with the pregnancy, my doctor was very clear with me. He was like, the likelihood that this would cause you some serious health issues are pretty high. And so he was wonderful with me during that entire process. But because of all of the nuances of that experience,
yeah.
I have to tell personally people in my life who start having these conversations, at the dinner table, which is weird as humans that we have abortion conversations at the dinner table. But I have to tell them, you need to know that you're not going to get a nuanced perspective from me. Now, it is entirely different in the therapy room, but I have 10 years of experience now. I
Right.
imagine for you, what was it clinically that you had to do within yourself to deal with the things that you experienced with your own abortions?
So I took my first abortion happened Thanksgiving weekend, which
Mm.
was super fun to get diagnosed around the time everyone was planning to leave.
Whew.
And at that point in time, it was 6 months after a wonderful man named Dr. George Tiller was killed. And
Mm.
so the second and third trimester abortion world was kind of turned on its head
Mhm.
because people became scared. Dr. Tiller was killed in his church. So that like not and this like he was shot. He had been shot before and recovered, but he was fatally shot. And people rightfully got scared. So
Mhm.
typically I could have had a surgical abortion in my state. However, the providers were really scared. And so that was not an option for me locally. I would have
Mhm.
had to drive to New Jersey in order to get that option because I was past kind of that 20-week point that so many states come down on in terms of restrictions.
Mhm.
So my choice was I could drive to New Jersey and I could get a dilation and evacuation, a DN,
Mhm.
or I could stay at my home hospital with one of my own OBGYNs that I knew and I could labor and deliver.
Mm.
And we just didn't want to do that traveling. I didn't know if like the drive home would be okay. It made
Yeah.
me nervous to be so far away from my own providers and
Yeah.
family. So we ended up deciding to labor and deliver. And that's like its own story in and of itself.
Mhm.
This was 2009. way before Dobbs, and
Yes.
I was having difficulty in a blue state
Mm-hmm.
that that is very permissive in terms of abortion care. I was
Yes.
having difficulty accessing it.
Yes.
So, I was lucky that my insurance covered it. Super
Mm-hmm.
lucky. If I worked for the government, my insurance would not cover it under the
Oof.
Hyde Amendment. So, that was another kind of congressional compromise that was made after Roe.
I so that appreciate your willingness to tell this story because I think that was something that was shocking to me right during the process that was incredibly helpful to me at the time. I won't say this for you, but the women who I knew, who I'd been friends with, but also women who were friends of my friends or who were family members reached out to me and said, "Hey, I went through something similar. Whatever you need, I
Yeah,
will support you." And just then start to hear how much more common it was around me because
yeah,
that was something else that was happening. Nobody was talking about this. This was 2011 at that point.
yeah,
Uh, but like I had no idea at that point how common it was for the all the cis women around me to have had miscarriages, to have had abortions, to have had need for this care
absolutely.
until that moment.
Yeah, and I found a lot of my support online. I was
Uh-huh.
lucky to kind of plug into one of those communities. I had 2 people in my area that had been open to me,
That's good.
and so, that was good, but they weren't people I was especially close with, so I was also really aware of not wanting to inundate them. So the online community became a place where I could blather as much as I wanted, and
Yeah.
people could skip over it or they could read it the next day or, they didn't necessarily feel like I'm inundating them. And I think that's a hard part about perinatal grief is that
Mhm.
most of the time people don't understand. They want to understand. It was always interesting to me when people compared their miscarriage to my abortion. I'm like, so I had a miscarriage too? No, these are not the same.
They are
Very,
not.
very different, and I wasn't welcome in any spaces that were for pregnancy loss because I chose. So what I like to say about that is, yes, I made the decision between terrible and horrible.
Correct.
Had no good option.
Yeah. Or sometimes it's terrible or death. There isn't
There's no
it
nuance.
isn't this version of choice. I think that that you're hitting on something important here. This version of choice that becomes this like demonized version of choice, that this idea that people are using abortion for birth control.
No, I can tell you in my 2nd trimester, it was firmly not birth control.
Uh, Same.
Yeah, both times, not birth control. And the one thing it's been a minute. So
Mhm.
the one thing from it is that actually it's gonna be 15 years from my first this fall. So I'm like, "Ooh, that's
Mm,
been a minute."
yeah.
Actually, I'm not grateful to have had the experience. That I don't think I necessarily needed that. I am grateful I could grow from it. I am grateful that I
Make
could.
meaning.
Yeah, but also I am grateful that I could carry on these 2 children's legacies by doing this work, by writing the books, by writing the articles, by writing the chapters, because they deserve that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I
We're
I
still
I
on your agenda, aren't we?
No, I think I mean, well, I
Yeah.
mean, but I think that this is how we can bring home to so many people out there that are listening who maybe don't have direct people they've gotten to hear their in-depth stories from, that when I do talk to, not necessarily in the therapy room, but when I do talk to friends or family or somebody who's an acquaintance who does keep talking to me after I tell them, like, I have a bias and you better be prepared because you're not, I'm gonna be very honest with you. But usually what happens is that it may or may not change how they see the choice to access abortion, but what it does do is it humanizes the choice.
Absolutely. And I've been on panels, genetic counselor I'm friendly with. And so she runs yearly for her genetic students as well as some of the med students for a panel that has someone like me who is terminated for medical reasons and then someone who is carried to term after poor prenatal diagnosis.
Mm,
And she has us both tell our stories. And the most beautiful thing about it is me and the other woman can leave and we can both have a conversation with one another and just be like, I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm really glad what I always say is I'm really glad you got to make that choice. It sounds like it was really the right one for you. And
yeah.
they'll be kind too to me. They're like, yeah, I'm glad you got to make the one that was right for you.
Yeah. And that ultimately that's what the what we're talking about is getting access to getting to do either.
Yeah. But, this kind of brings me to the idea of like, what can we do? Right. I think
Yes.
if we get to this place of like, oh, we're so helpless
Mhm.
as clinicians, we hear these stories all the time. Or I should
Yes.
say, I hear these stories all the time.
I do as well.
Yeah. And so what we can do is we can form a kind of mashup in a way of our different clients' experiences. And then we can share those experiences because it's all unidentified. It doesn't belong to a single person, but we can share them then with state legislatures, which I think is super important, or even
Mm,
federal legislatures. And that matters. And I'll
yes.
give a story about how that matters because I am a 100% diehard advocate. Last week, I was advocating for IVF. So
Yes.
all reproduction, because it's all related to one another.
Mhm.
Bodily control is not just about abortion. This is now impacting pregnancy care, and that's really
Yes.
concerning. It is impacting hospitals who have maternity wards or not. It
Yes.
is impacting which doctors choose to learn to practice in that state.
It is impacting menstruation care. It's impacting endometriosis care. The people that I work with on a regular basis, because I see a lot of people with pelvic pain for whatever the reasons, whether it's post-pregnancy, endometriosis, vulvodynia, whatever it is, getting access to care, even in places where abortion is legal. Fear around getting access to pain management during an endometriosis flare, that they're requiring people to take pregnancy tests now where they would not have necessarily required that before.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know of a story of a 50-year-old woman who has arthritis and was using Miffy or Miso, I don't remember which,
Uh-huh.
as a off-label way of treating her
Mhm.
arthritis. Had been doing it for
Uh,
years.
Clarify for the listeners what Miffy and Miso is.
Sorry.
You're good.
Mifepristone and misoprostol, those are the two abortion drugs when we talk about medication abortion. That is the 1-2 kind of sequence that you take in order to ensure with great accuracy that an abortion has been, and you can do it in your home. And as I said, you can get this medication sent to you in most places right now. So
For
for now,
now, and we are recording this in June of 2025
right,
as of this moment.
right.
And as we have already discussed, this is incredibly fluid. So I do want to kind of speak directly to clinicians again. How can we, as providers, ethically document or support patients navigating abortion in legally hostile states without putting them or ourselves at risk?
So I like the less is more approach. I like
Hmm.
the be vague, be vague, be vague.
Hmm.
I also come from sort of the belief of treatment notes don't have to be exhaustive.
You and I are in the same boat here. Hmm.
And I think about whatever I write, how would I feel if the client saw it, if it was
Hmm.
subpoenaed for some kind of legal case or whatnot,
Hmm.
which has happened.
Yes.
So, being able to keep it more vague, I think protects everyone.
Hmm.
Where I think can be difficult, and I don't know where this is going, is this desire to have a countrywide connection of EMRs. And so
Mhm.
where my real concern is like, okay, I've had
Yeah.
an abortion in Maryland. What happens
Mhm.
if I go to Kentucky and I need hospital care and they get my
Yes.
records and they see she's had 2 abortions? What does that
Yes.
mean?
Yes.
How will that
Or the role of AI now in EMRs that want to and we're gonna do a whole probably 2 hours on AI and in therapy also. It's coming, just be ready. But, like, the recording of sessions or, I don't know about you, but I've definitely walked into I went and saw my bone doctor who was giving my first, steroid shot, and he asked if he could record the visit so he could transcribe it for later, which was fine in that moment, but there are many, many electronic health record systems that are trying to implement these ways that we don't necessarily know how safe that information is or how safe it will be kept.
And I think, when you're dealing with a wannabe authoritarian government like we have
Mhm.
right now,
Mhm.
I can see that being very attractive to have that
Yes.
AI information, healthcare information, mining that data.
Mhm.
That
Absolutely. And at minimum, those of us who have ever billed insurance, we know at minimum, at some point, this information will be used as a way to create barriers to paying for care in some way, shape, or form. We know that that will absolutely be the case because why on earth would they want to make our lives easier? That's never been really the motivation by insurance companies.
yeah. So
So,
I want to just circle back to one thing.
yes.
I um I have been an abortion advocate, and the uh ACLU asked me to go to South Carolina that had, and again, this is now 2013, and they had a ban for abortions less than 20 weeks. I think that's what they wanted to do. And so I testified in front of the Senate. The funny part was I had my young son with me because he was still nursing, so
Had to bring him.
couldn't help that. And I was able to share my story. And there was one senator who had another place he needed to be. And so my kind of handler from the ACLU was able to connect us. It's kind of a, in the hallway kind of meeting.
Mhm.
And so we started talking. I built some commonalities with him, which was kind of cool. Like we had some overlap. And then I shared with him my story and I said, here's the problem. I was 21 weeks, quickly heading to 22 weeks. I would have been denied care under this law. And what was really cool then is like, and then I wouldn't have had this kid.
Ah.
So like being able to do that, my handler called me a couple days later and she's like, I don't know what you said to him, but he changed his vote and it didn't get out of committee.
Beautiful.
Now, of course, that got changed several years later, but pretty amazing story. So, yes, we can make a difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We can absolutely make a difference. I do want to ask, like, so many of us, you and I've both shared today, have our own reproductive stories. Abortion, miscarriage, IVF, fertility stories. How can we stay regulated? I really want to give therapists and healthcare providers something to hold on to while you are holding this space for your patients and your clients with similar pain.
It's really hard, particularly if your clients are going through the opposite of what you're going through. They have a, seamless pregnancy and everything's going according to plan.
Mhm.
I had a client in 2009 where we were both due the same, like, 2 or 3 days.
Ooh.
Huh? And so we had a great rapport. She called me
Mhm.
early because she was wanting to avoid postpartum depression after the second. She
Mhm.
had it terribly after the first,
Mhm.
and everything was fine until my 20-week scan, where my world came crashing down, and things were fine for her. And so I took some time off. Uh,
Mhm.
I connected her to another therapist. And when I was coming back, what I said to her was, I want to give you the choice. You are
Mhm.
welcome to stay with the person you're working with, or I'm happy to see you as well. If I didn't
Mhm.
feel like I could do it, I wouldn't have said it.
Mhm.
So she ended up coming back to me. And the hardest part about it was like she was my pregnancy twin.
Yep.
So being able to see her development in pregnancy keyed me into where I would have been, what it might have looked like for me.
Yes.
And so every time I saw her, I looked at her from here. Like it would have been great if there was Zoom, but there was
Mhm.
not. So I would just look at her like from mid chest up. I would not look at her belly. I could not look at her belly.
Uh,
So it might be kind of things like that. It might be grounding yourself. So I have a nice velvet chair in my office and like I do a
mhm.
whole lot of grounding where I'm just like stroking that thing.
Mhm.
Or if you have fidget toys, like you're allowed to use them too. So all of these kind of, yeah. Well, and I got my essential oils. So that's something
Yes.
is, there's infinite ways that you can ground yourself. But I would say that it's about grounding yourself and activating your parasympathetic nervous system. So
Yes.
calming down whatever the trauma response is or that kind of
Yeah.
fight freeze response is
Mhm.
and being able to, okay, everything's okay. I'm okay. I am safe here and now. Getting back
Yes.
into that place.
You're talking about being able to use the skills that we're all very familiar with, but also letting yourself know and letting all of our listeners know that this will likely happen to you. If you do continue to serve pregnant people and anybody who's using reproductive health care, you're at some point going to have to regulate your nervous system
Yeah.
because you might come across some of these triggers that are just either known or unknown. And I can hear that focus of her face only
Huh?
that you did.
Mhm.
Just having that knowing that you could make it through those sessions, but knowing that you were going to need ways to do it.
Absolutely.
Did you have supervision or people around you at that point that kind of helped you through that?
My God, 100%. It helps that many of my friends are also clinicians.
Yes.
And one of them happened to also have terminated for medical reasons. And she and I
Mhm.
connected way before I did, but I had known that. And so she was also a really, really useful resource for me and continues to be a good friend. So
That's lovely. So I am kind of curious, like what gives you hope in this landscape?
I think the things that give me hope is that I don't know of any places that have a majority of people that are anti choice. That
Mm,
we're seeing resoundingly in places like Kansas, as I mentioned, Missouri, Ohio. We're seeing referendums around abortion care, which is
mhm.
amazing. That's
Yes.
coming from the people. Florida would have passed theirs, but Ron DeSanctimonious had
Mhm.
some meddling he had to do with it. So he just kind of made it really a higher bar that they had to cross than what was
Mhm.
necessary. But that was purposeful.
Yes.
Yeah. So, there was a majority of Floridians who
Mhm.
wanted different kind of care because they were sick of reading stories in their newspaper about women who had PPROM and couldn't get
Mhm.
the care until they were super, super sick. And oh, wait, they died of sepsis
Yeah.
because they couldn't get the care that is the standard of care. Because
Yes.
sometimes an abortion is actually like it is a medical term. It is absolutely health care. But a lot of times it's also the standard of care.
Yes.
So if we're talking about someone with an ectopic pregnancy, the standard of care is to remove the pregnancy, which sometimes might mean removing a part of the reproductive system.
Mhm.
But standards of care that now hospitals or doctors cannot employ the standards of care that they've spent years and years and years refining their techniques and knowing.
Yes.
And now they have to ask the lawyer, what am I allowed to do? And a lot
Mhm.
of times the question back to them is, "Well, how sick is she? Like, is death imminent?" And the doctor's like, "Not yet, but it will be."
Mhm.
So it's that question then of like, how sick is sick enough to be
Yeah.
able to get care? Um, and to have doctors having all of this moral injury
Yes.
from having to, of knowing, like, there's this really interesting study that just came out that speaks about abortion providers and their spiritual beliefs. And
Mm,
so many of them in that study were talking about providing this care can feel spiritual to them. Like they
yes.
were put on this earth to provide this care, which is, I think, beautiful.
Yeah.
And as I said, like I feel like I went through what I went through. So I could write books to help. Shameless plug.
Yeah. Not no, not shameless. It is absolutely going to be in the show notes, y'all, so that you can be reading it, so that you can be thinking through it. I appreciate the framework of thinking that there are referendums everywhere, that people are asking for this care because
Demanding it. It's not that they're asking, they're demanding it.
and and that it really does help because you when we are faced with information the way that it comes at all of us at all times with different biases in that information, hearing that there are people across the United States that are just like, no, we need this. It doesn't matter where we're from, what our background is, we need the option to make the choice.
Yeah, yeah.
So I to shift our gears to a question directly from from a therapist. For those of you who've been listening, I added this segment where we go over to our friend Reddit and we look in the therapist subreddit and we grab a question related to our topic today. So this question comes from a therapist who is trying to understand a client weighing getting an abortion and wants to more help that person work through her ambivalence. And so this person's question is, I've worked with women who've had abortions before, but usually it's in their reported medical history or they bring it up as a grief event, usually years, if not decades in the past. I've never had someone openly considering it before, and she was planning on taking the medication to induce it before our session this week. I'm person-centered all the way, so when she brought it up potentially ending her pregnancy, last week I said that regardless what she chooses as her therapist, I'm in her corner and that she doesn't have to worry about judgment from me. We also talked about what would influence her decision either way if she had stated she was on the as she stated she was on the fence about it and settled on a metric within her control. Has anyone worked with a client in a similar situation before, weighing abortion due to economic pressure and unstable partner? If so, any advice going forward? Dr.
Absolutely.
Julie, what's your
Yeah.
take?
Yeah, so many takes. So it sounds like this person might have really benefited from discernment counseling. And I
Uh-huh.
see a lot of people who are pregnant unexpectedly and they're not sure what to do.
Uh-huh.
It might not be financially related. I've worked with teens who are not sure what they do.
Uh-huh.
Where I keep myself is I don't know what the right choice is for them. So there's no way I
Uh-huh.
can guide them to it because I
That's
don't
right.
know what it is.
Yes.
Can't know. And that's okay. And I say that to these clients too.
Uh-huh.
And most of the time, this is like a one off kind of session. It's not someone I necessarily see again because they got what they needed.
Uh-huh.
But we do a lot of future casting. So I'll talk
Uh,
about like 1 year, 5 years. Let's go in both directions. I'll give homework like, I want you to sit with this decision for an entire day, see what that feels, see what comes up for you. Now sit with the other decision for an entire day. How did that feel? Notice what came up for you. And financial abuse is totally a reason in which people might seek out abortion care. Domestic violence is another reason that people seek out
mhm.
abortion care. Not having money of their own or money that they could, continue to support their children. Totally a reason that people seek out abortion care. So,
Uh-huh.
not that I need to justify anyone's decisions. I do not. It's not my place. In fact, I was meeting with someone today and she started justifying her decision. And I said, let me stop you. You
Uh,
don't need to justify your decision. Whatever the circumstances were, doesn't matter. Like to
yeah.
me, it doesn't matter. You sought out this care. Okay.
Okay. I think what you just showed us is the ability to be able to use not only just in session but homework strategically to let this person sit in their own feelings, their own thoughts, so that they truly can make the decision that's best for them in their circumstances. And I think you are absolutely correct. We can only know such a small snapshot for that person. They're telling us what they can in such a limited amount of time. And so they're going to be weighing options that they may not have even shared with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that is an excellent, I'll probably include that in our guide, folks, so that you can be thinking through homework that might be helpful to your people if you're helping someone actually try to understand what this decision could be for them.
Yeah.
So I so appreciate you having been with us today. And if our listeners want to get in contact with you, how do they find you in this great, large world?
Well, you can find me on the interwebs.
Hmm.
I still just take great pleasure in saying that. But my practice is greaterwashingtontherapy.com. So you can read all about me. Surely you can Google me, but you can certainly connect to me through the website. It's probably the easiest way to do it. And I provide consultation. I wrote a book for clinicians that don't do this work so that they could at least have something to help to understand some of these nuances, because I'm actually in a book club with a group of people that are all pro-choice identified therapists. They came from a listserv that Erika and I are both on together.
Uh-huh.
Interesting about it is it was awesome. They decided to read my book. And so we've been doing it like
Love it.
chapter. It's going to happen again next year. That was decided at
Mhm.
the last book club. So
Uh-huh.
it's just been a really cool experience. And I came to the first one and I said, you all are totally willing to, like, you can kick me out. It might feel weird to have the editor of this book here. Like, you're allowed to criticize it. I want to know. I want the
Either
feedback.
that or you could be using this group as the second edition test
Right.
group. Like
Right.
that would be.
I mean, the conversations we've had have been so uplifting,
Uh,
including like the last book club we had, just hearing from several members being like, I've been doing this work a really long time. I hadn't considered this. And so that's
see,
awesome.
see now I'm gonna have to get it. I'm gonna have to get in the listserv book club. It's something I haven't lived to do, but I just need to do it. I am. Are you taking any clients right now here in June of 2025?
I have a couple of slots. I also have other people in my practice that practice under SciPAC or are licensed in DC, Maryland, Virginia, who have openings and who have training in this because I trained them myself. Like, is it prochoicetherapist.com? Is that
I
the
I
website?
believe so, but
Okay.
I will double check and it will be in the show notes, folks. It's a wonderful community and just the level of information that is shared. Everybody looks out for one another. So it is wonderful space to be in if you are a clinician that does this work on a regular basis. So
Absolutely.
Dr. Julie, again, thank you for being with us. I know I'm going to have you back again. There's no doubt in my mind. This state of things is very fluid. So
Yes.
folks, thanks for sticking around to the end of the episode. Remember, you can get a CEU for this. You can. You absolutely can. We got NBCC, we got ASECT, and likely this will count for an ethics CEU. So if you have any questions around that, please reach out to us. And we are at 2xlabs.org. I can't words today. TWOXLABS.org. We will see you all next time.